So, thank you for turning up for the afternoon on a beautiful day. My God, it was good here yesterday. But I haven't seen the sun for 9 months. So, a day like yesterday was just like batteries being recharged. So, Rika, Dan, thank you so much for being here and all the other people that helped put it together. Now, I have to correct you immediately. I am not the principal of Studio Granda. I am half of the principal of Studio Granda. My partner in life and crime is Margaret, who I met at the AA in London, and she dragged me back to Iceland streaming because I lived in a beautiful country, the UK, and she tried to convince me that Iceland was a more beautiful country. Well, it's beautiful, but it's much colder. So that's who I am, and I'd like to talk about our work in Reykjavik. Now, I understand that the theme of this conference is industrial topography. Well, industry isn't a big thing in Iceland. This is Icelandic industry, 1925. You may scoff, but in the basement here is a leather tanning shop. This here is a craftsman's workshop making furniture. In this basement here is the first soft drinks factory in Iceland, which is then replaced by the first chocolate factory. The head office and storeroom was this shed here. This was an apartment that was owned by the first bioscientist in Iceland. It was also a piano sales room and a travel agency. This is Icelandic industry. Now you can take a building like that, and actually what happened over time is they added another floor on the top here and actually a little bit on the front. And it just so happens that 25 years ago we bought it and we upgraded it. We painted it yellow. And by painting it yellow means that you can use it as an architect's office. And the wonderful thing about that is you don't need to do much else. You don't need to put new insulation. You don't need to put a new heating system, because even in Iceland, up there, 64 degrees north, in the wintertime it's cold, so we turn the heating up. But in the summertime, we get solar radiation on these windows. So actually, even though the walls are only solid concrete this thick, the heating costs of that space are almost identically the same as a fully insulated, fully sealed modern building. And with that, it's probably one of the most ecologically advanced buildings on the planet. So considering that it's actually a complete wreck of a building, it's quite remarkable. That's what we're dealing with when we're dealing with historic buildings. And we can work with them in different ways. Now, just along the road from that, we have a photographer friend who bought this building here. Now, this is a picture taken in the 60s, and he bought this house here, and he bought this shop on the side, which is run by this fellow here. And the goods in the shop were prepared in the basement here. This is another industry in Iceland. And when he bought it, he decided to do up the house bit. So he did up this bit here. And that became his studio. But he always wanted a gallery and thought that the other part of the property could be turned into a gallery. That looks like quite an easy job, but the thing is, it looks okay on the front, but it wasn't so good around the back. So what we did, working with him, was we reorganized the floors. We put the basement level on the same level as the other basement. We put the ground floor, we lifted it up and put it on the same level as the house. And the top floor, which is actually the roof, we connected to the attic of the adjacent house. Very, very simple trick. We allowed a little bit of light in through here, through the roof. Staircase down. Super, super simple. With that, we can then open between the original house and the new gallery. And this is the existing party wall of the adjoining house. We just left that. And then looking back from the gallery into the house. down the stairs, just a little bit detailed, just a bit of light coming in through there. And if you throw in a few details like the roof light and a handrail and a staircase, and you have a nice secret garden up or a terrace on the roof, what you get is exactly what you started with. And the most remarkable thing about that, because everyone has been banging their drum today about the Mies van der Rohe Award, this was shortlisted for the Mies van der Rohe Award. This is one of 20 projects. It must have been about 15 years ago now. I think it's the smallest ever Mies van der Rohe finalist. Not finalist, sorry, shortlist. But I was told it nearly got to the finalist, but it didn't. So that's one way of dealing with the whole thing. You just essentially rebuild what you already had. Now, probably about 500 meters from that is the harbour. And the harbour in 1925 was pretty basic. Iceland really is just coming out of essentially a third world economy. It was been under the auspices of the Danish government, so it didn't have total freedom. And as you can see by the ships in the harbour, they're kind of rudimentary. And the harbour front was basically a very rough rubble shoreline with the occasional pier running out to it for the ships to dock up to. But around about 1930, 35, things started to move. And when things move in Iceland, they tend to move very quickly. So they embraced concrete, and they poured concrete like crazy. And they built this building here. And this is the new harbour building. And through that came all the goods to Reykjavik. So this was very much like the Gare des Maritimes that we saw earlier from Mikkel. So it's a stop for the goods before they go on. His came by rail, ours came by ship. And here you can see all the barrels out the front. And the building was just very, very clean, very, very simple. In many respects, almost identical to this one. And as you'll see it later, you'll see the columns inside actually resemble these. The plan is the same, 5 meter grid. Staircase handrails, if you go down to the basement, are exactly the same as the staircase handrails you have there. It's copy-paste. So what happened is the city decided to turn this into an art museum. This is the building here. This is the new shoreline. This is Phil here. And in their wisdom, the city authority officials decided that they wouldn't buy all of the building. They'd only buy 1/3 of it. So they had the ground floor and second floor here, and the ground floor and second floor here, a bit of the third floor, and this is a hole in the middle. And so we took part in this open competition. No, it was an invited competition. I thought, how are we going to put this thing together? What is the glue that's going to make this project something else than just ripping it out, painting it white, and turning it into an art gallery? So we thought, well, there's one thing that's very precious about this place. The sea is here now, but the sea was here. So if you go back in time and put the two images together, you can see the building here is actually standing where the sea was. And before this building was built, there was a pier here. And that pier led to Aðalstræti. Aðalstræti means main road. It's the first road in Reykjavik. Through that pier came all of the culture and all of the goods in former times. So that was the main source of knowledge into the country. No aeroplanes, everything came by boat. Okay, we got the one-liner to win a competition with that one. We're going to call that the pier axis, that we joined the two sides of the building together. So here we can see this is the ground floor. Now, okay, now the white lines don't show up. There's always going to be a risk. But here on the street side, got gallery space, shop. This is the pier going through the building, and these are storage spaces at the back. When you have an art gallery, it's quite useful to mark it in a way so that people know it's there. Now, you can put a big sign that says Art Gallery, or you can make an intervention that's something new. But we wanted to do something that was a little bit more subtle, that was something part of the building. So we did a thing that's very, very easy. You all have a computer. I know that thing that you say, cut, copy, twist, paste. So you can just take that there, cut, copy, twist, paste. It takes about 45 seconds. In real life, it's a little bit heavy. It's 28 tons. But that canopy picks up the geometry of the access through the building, and at the same time says, here is something else going on in this building, something that hasn't happened before. If we go inside, we say, this is the new space. This is an extension of the street. When you're outside in the street, you are the observer. You look around you, you see what's about you. You're seeing people, you're seeing cars, you're seeing buildings. When you go into this space here, it's dark because it's clad in steel. You become the observed. Your role is reversed, and all of a sudden, you are the most important thing in the room because you're the new meat in the room. You become the attraction. Everyone turns up, who's that? Just come in. And that then prepares you or cleanses you for the experience of art in the galleries, which on the ground floor is just here. Because then you see them as a fresh light. You've been through a transition space, and here the gallery is just as the room was. It was unpainted. So here we have a painted room. If we had this room, here it would have been a white room. But in this instance, it was unpainted. We left it unpainted. If we go a little bit further into the building, you see this is the gap between two halves. There's a space between. And that space was really the most powerful space in the whole building, because it's a room without a roof. I actually don't know of another example of that, certainly of this scale in Iceland. There were small internal gardens and so on, but of this kind of scale, something that you would probably find quite normal here, we don't have. So we're very well aware when we made our insertion of the new pier connection, we actually destroyed that. We cut it off. We changed it. So that's why, instead of doing it with a solid thing, we did it with doors. So these doors can be opened so you can connect into what's left of the space behind, and there we have a multi-purpose space. So that's looking from the multi-purpose space back over the two-story walkway into the space behind. So you can have internal activities, external activities, and activities that bridge both internal and external. As our friend earlier was saying, the most important thing about contemporary art spaces is you're making it for art that you don't know what it is. So everything about this building was made in a way that it could be open, changed, move around. It could become something else. There was always another way that you could see the art. If we go back into that axis, we find the two staircases that lead us up to the upper floors. And they deliver us to another level. So you're at another plane. You're actually higher up in the city here. And that plane gives us a visual connection back to the entrance space. So you are now, again, the observer. You are seeing the new meat walking through the door here, saying, oh, he or she's just come into the gallery. You're reconnected. From that space, you can then go into the gallery rooms. Now, the galleries are organized, there are 4 of them, and they're all, let's say, decorated in the way that they were before. So this one here had an unpainted ceiling, but the walls were painted, so we left it that way. And the windows that are along the facade, they're actually a little difficult because they're like at this height here, so all the art would be competing with them. So instead, we put the wall up and allowed the light to come in from behind. So you'd see the light change as the clouds go over. And if you wanted to make a black box, you can lift up a shutter and it becomes black. You go to the next room, we see it's all white. And in the final room, it's even got a white floor. But this particular room, we said we could have a pink floor and walls if you wanted to. And if you wanted to have a connection out to space, you can lift these shutters and you can see out. So all these things enable you to use these spaces for a different kind of art. Now, one of the biggest criticisms of the building at the time it was done was that all these galleries had columns in them, exactly like this. An artist hated the columns because their pictures were just a bit too big to fit between the columns. But it's interesting, this building is 25 years old. That was just after the time that all of those perfect galleries were made in Germany. Do you remember them? Mönchengladbach, all the ones along the museum bank in Frankfurt, and God knows where. They're all there, all over Germany. It was the new temples because people stopped going to church on Sundays. And there's something incredibly uneventful about them. You put the art into them, and it doesn't matter which town you go to, every gallery is the same. So every gallery will have a white wall, the light coming in the right places, some Urco lighting, and a Joseph Beuys on the floor. Fantastic, well done. We've got our new gallery. We were lucky we caught that wave. We created a space which wasn't a perfect gallery. It was a very, very bad gallery. But it had identity and a quality that what has happened with time is the artists have started to work with it, so that the exhibitions would be made more site-specific to the building, or they take parts of the building and extend them or reduce them or work with them. So we've had all kinds of exhibitions that we would not have had if we'd had a perfect white space. Sometimes a white sheet of paper isn't the best thing to have. Or if you get a project, if the client says to you, do whatever you like, that's the worst project you can get. You want to have a project there are constraints. And that's what this gallery offered. That's post-rationalization. That's a learning curve. But it's something that was, in this instance, very lucky. And then at the end of the top floor, we have the obligatory cafe. Now, the one thing about cafes in art galleries is, number one, every art gallery should have a cafe. You know that? That's because it's in every brief for every art gallery that you've ever seen. What it doesn't say is that the cafe should be run by somebody that can run a cafe. So this cafe has actually, in the 25 years of the building, I think it's been successfully operational for about 5 years. Because to run a cafe, you have to have somebody that wants to run a cafe in that space. It isn't enough to say it's with an art gallery. It isn't enough to say it has the best view in Reykjavik. It doesn't have to say it's in a half-decent building. It has to be run by someone who has that passion. For some reason, the city of Reykjavik doesn't seem to be able to find that person. So now it's some sort of public space. And that's a learning thing. You can't force functions into a building and expect them to happen. You have to create the mechanism for the building to work. That's an expensive lesson to learn. The countryside. We all love the countryside. And who doesn't want to go out and feel that sunshine and the flies and the smell of the cow shit? There's something just otherworldly about that you don't get in the city. So this is the dream of every Icelander. Oh, we're going out to the countryside at the weekend. And it usually rains. So another part of that dream isn't just going to the countryside, it's actually owning some. And if you have a little bit of money, you might want to buy something that exists in the countryside. There's a lot of these buildings. This is a drawing from the Agricultural Drawing Agency. It's a standard drawing for a cowshed and a barn. And almost every one that was made sort of looked the same on the outside, but they were different sizes, different heights, and really there was every kind of imaginable variation on them. But the one thing they did have in common was they were extremely badly built. But because they were part of that Icelandic countryside, people had a romantic vision of them. And when they look at this and say, isn't it fantastic? Now we can go to the countryside, we can buy this for a snip, and we can turn this into something special. Just look at the spaces, how we can make them beautiful. Just imagine we could paint these walls and this become our bedroom. Or if we just put some nice wood on the floor here, that could be a really wonderful space. But then you look underneath and you see that there's about 400 cubic meters of cow dung and realize that there's another reality to deal with. So we had clients that had this dream. But we were lucky that they weren't clients that just had the dream. They also had the means to do something with the dream, and they had the guts to take that dream to a level that very few people do. Clients like this don't come very often. And actually, sometimes it's actually quite difficult to recognize them when they do, because these were just two people that looked very, very ordinary, and they were just saying, we had this dream about having a house and country. We didn't realize how much guts they had when we first met them. And by working with them, did we discover that. So they knew that to take on the cowshed and the barn was a big job. But another part of the little ensemble that we have here in the farm was a tractor shed. Said, let's just try that first. So it's a simple building. It's essentially 4 walls with a timber roof on it. And inside, you see the timber roof, and it has an earth floor. So they wanted to create some kind of guest house in the country. And we suggested, okay, the size of this building, we can put 4 guest rooms, and each one can have its own bathroom, and we can have a common room in the end. And we do some funky stuff with the ceiling and things like that. They were good for that. And because the gentleman of the client body had a passion for tractors, he suggested that we should paint the room in glossy tractor livery. So here's your John Deere room. Or if you had a Massey Ferguson, you can have the Massey Ferguson room. So it sounds like a silly idea. It's a really cheap idea, but it actually works wonderfully. And between this is between Kubota and the New Holland. You look out into the common room, which is at least a little bit calmer, with its view over the fjord. Stepping outside of the building, we reclad it entirely in copper. So it's the same material choice that we had before, the corrugated, but we put copper through the corrugated machine instead of regular steel, so it will never need to be painted. So we'll just have to come back and deal with this in 2 or 3 lives after this one. It lasts forever, this stuff. Now, if we go over there, we can go back to the cowshed. And when you start on a project like this, it's a good idea to start at the bottom. Do you remember that pile of cow dung? Well, it was in this room here. And the idea on paper that you just take that room, you clean it out, and you'd be able to have places for an assembly, something like this, a gathering, or it could be a kitchen for people that were in tents. And there's toilets and showers and so on. That's really easy on paper. The reality is, when you're dealing with a building like this, is you discover that under all of that muck, there are no foundations. And the ceiling height is extremely variable because it's just earth in the bottom. It's just whatever land height it came to. So we spent an awful lot of money digging out underneath here, putting new foundations just to make those spaces. Afterwards, it looks easy. But actually, to create this was a phenomenal undertaking. And you also have to essentially take the building apart to put it back together again, so it looks as bad as it did when you started. So this is the former undercroft. And on top of that, we have new accommodation in the cowshed. Now, That's a series of 4 rooms, each with its own private bathroom. And to access them, you walk around a walkway around the outside. And that way, we don't need to consider the insulation of this wall, which is extremely bad concrete. It will hold itself up structurally, but it leaks like a sieve. It's full of all kinds of organic matter. It looks ugly as hell, but when you move further away, it has a romantic atmosphere to it that everybody loves. So you keep that and put a new building inside of it. Here we've got a communal area, which goes out to Northern Terrace. We'll talk about that in a moment. Here we have a kitchen, a reception area. Here's parking for the client. And the main entrance to the apartment above, which I'll go through later, is here. So here we are in that corridor that goes around the building with its framed views of the countryside and looking back towards the tractor shed. So you're essentially in that derelict shed as you found it. Then on the inside, you've got the rooms themselves. But when you do the rooms, you mustn't forget the former inhabitants are these fellows here. And when they defecated through this grill here. Now, the screen, you might not see it, but there's a grill here on the floor. Now, this is our client, okay? This is somebody who is in their late 60s. So they're older than I am now, and I think I'm an old guy. And they said, we can use those. Where would you use them? That was lovely. So everyone goes in, and they just love the decor, but it takes them a while to realize where it came from. And there's an enjoyment in that. It's fun, you know. You're allowed to have these games. It doesn't always have to be so dead serious. And the same way, they had also taken portraits of the cows that were there. And these are very important portraits. This is one of them. This is in one of the rooms. And what we did is we took them into Photoshop and took a color picker, and we said, okay, there. And if you do that, and you put the color picker into a color thing, you can get out the NCS number. So we can get this one here, we can go to a paint shop, and we can paint the room. So all the rooms are directly registered to the former inhabitants. And we didn't try and choose a nicer color. We always chose the first color that came. So, of course, if we'd gone here, it would have been a different color to if we'd gone here. But it's interesting that the colors, this one is a beautiful, rich brown. Another one is a purple. Like, where did that purple come? We've never seen a purple cow apart from a milker bar. But cows in Iceland have got purple in them, believe me. So one of the rooms is purple. And so there we are, that's a room. And then we step outside and we go and have breakfast or, sit around in the evening in the communal area. And that looks out to the north. Because the thing about Iceland is that you think, why on earth would you want to have a north-facing terrace? And that's because in summertime, the sun never goes down. That's where the sun is. It's shining at you from the north, not from the south. So you can sit there and look out over the fjord. And the connection between this terrace here and the land is made with these concrete slats, which we actually picked up from the floor of the cowshed above. So no part of the animal being the building, is thrown away. Everything that we can use is taken and put back into it. And then in wintertime, of course, there's no sun. Then the sun goes down. It's dark and miserable. But every now and then we get this fantastic light show, and there's no better place to see it from than that northern terrace. So it's a kind of magical place. Now, if we think a little about the upper floor, it's up here. And I showed you that there was a staircase up on the inside that went in. You went in here down below and you came up a staircase. When we were building the project, the client rang us and said, hey, Steve, we've got a problem. I thought, oh, God, no, this is something really serious. The flat is fantastic, but we have to go up the staircase or take the lift. we really liked the idea that we could walk out onto the hillside at the side of it. So, okay, we'll just make a bridge. So that's a bridge so you can walk out and have your morning coffee up on the hillside. That was designed in 20 minutes. She rang me, I sent it, she looked at the iPad and said, yes, go for it. You know, there are sometimes those moments in this job that is just great to be an architect. So that's where they go in for the morning coffee. You normally go in here, and this is the bridge. You can see it's no small bridge. This is a major piece of infrastructure. I mean, we make these for the city of Reykjavik. They cost an arm and a leg. Well, you come up in the staircase here, or you take the lift, which is in the middle of it. And here we've got a kitchen with an incredible view out over the fjord. Here we've got a sitting area and a terrace on the roof of the cowshed, and then the bedroom wing here on the other side. And the whole point about when you're making or when you're working with this kind of building, which is incredibly badly built, is when you add to it, you have to use the same building techniques that are used when it was built. So sometimes for the shuttering, you use corrugated metal, like on these doors over here. It makes fantastic shuttering, and it gives this lovely, lovely light pattern. Or you use just regular, what we call doka, which it's, I don't know if you use that, it's plywood, which has got lots of nail holes in it. So all the concrete is extremely rudimentary. But what's interesting is when you put something precious next to something which is very rough, like this corrugated oak screen, it becomes something else. Or this highly polished stainless steel custom counter, you get another level of quality to it. So even though this is beautiful stuff, it becomes even more beautiful because it's next to something which is actually fundamentally quite unpleasant. And then you take that to the next stage in the bathrooms when you're actually getting close to the body, then you use even nicer materials. But those materials have also chosen that they have a certain quality that echoes the concrete. So we never go so far away from that palette. We're not using Calacata here. So we use something which has echoes of concrete in it. And so the final result is essentially, the final result is actually very, very close to what they bought, apart from they emptied their pockets in the process. And you never know if you succeeded when you're an architect. And the idea was that we maintain that we maintain that level of rusticness and decrepit porn. Okay. He's got something to say, this fellow. But we had it sealed for us because there's a wonderful moment. There's a group of Austrians came to stay here. One gentleman came into the drive area in the front and said, I'm not staying in that ramshackle hut. I'm going to stay in a proper hotel. He refused to go in until his friends actually took him in and made him realize inside this there was actually something very, very palatable. So the trick worked. And so far it seems to be succeeding as a destination for people to stay. So I'm going to go to our final project now. So we're not going to be here for all day. Now, in the center of Reykjavik, there's the Parliament building here. And next to the Parliament building is a vacant lot. 40 years ago, well, 38 years ago, we took part in a competition for that lot to make a new building for the Parliament. We were 26 years old. It was a ghastly proposal. And everybody said, this is very, very exciting, but totally ridiculous, and gave us some money. Well, that was very nice because we were young, and we took part in the next competition for the next building, which is the next year, for this building here. This is the City Hall. Now, because we'd made such a ghastly proposal here, we knew we had to grow up. So we did a better one here, and we won that competition. So that's the Reykjavik City Hall. Now, because we knew that there was going to be a new Parliament building on the other side of the street, we put a reflective pool here, which should not only reflect this building, but also the new Parliament building. So I'm talking about time now. I'm no longer talking about industrial issues. This is how time works in architecture. Things happen and things change. And one of the things that happened in that intervening period, what then would have been something like 30 years or so period, is that on that empty site, there was an archaeological dig. That's the site. And all those little dots are things that they found in this archaeological dig. So they discovered that this is the earliest known site of human settlement in Iceland. It just happens to be under the site for the new Parliament building. And then what happens is they offer a new competition to build there. So we thought, this one's got our name on it. So we take part in this competition. And this time we win it. And because we knew about these archaeological finds, which amongst other things there were signs of the production of bricks, or there was the sign of the production of iron, or there was artifacts that actually hadn't been found in Iceland previously. We thought there's something really, really precious about this place, and we thought that we could hang our proposal on that. So what we said is that when they dig through an archaeological site, they go through the layers of time, the strata of time. This is going from our time to the time of the past. How about when we do our new building, we build the layers of the future? And the layers of future are built with Icelandic rock. Again, this is the one-liner that wins you a competition. So here we've got 6 different kinds of Icelandic rock, and the politicians clapped their hands, and we got a kiss on the cheek, and we got a nice check, and we got the contract. That's when the fun starts, because the State Building Authority, the engineers, the local people that actually cut stone and so on, said, well, this is kind of daft. Why do you want Icelandic stone? And you get it much cheaper and ready-made from China. And even when we went to the accreditation people for CO2, the emissions calculation of this building, they said, this is not going to save any emissions using Icelandic stone because our data is based on stone from Norway, so the shipping doesn't count. Okay. There's a numbers thing that we didn't quite understand there. We didn't give up. We would listen to the politicians for once. So we went around the country, and we found stone from building sites. We found stone that was used to make sea defenses. We found stone that was actually just laying after a previous it's not even a quarry. There's a scavenging stone from a hillside and left it in a wreck. We took it and we fixed the hillside. We took all these stones and we actually managed to get a local contractor to produce this stone for the building so it could actually look like this. But it takes legwork to do that. And it takes an awful lot of pain trying to convince all the people who are stacked up against you. So it's interesting when we talk about industry, this is also industry, because sometimes the industry machine is not doing what you're wanting to do to achieve your architecture, and it's almost certainly not doing what you want it to do to achieve some kind of ecological goal. I'll talk about ecological things in a moment. So there's the stone racked up. Here we've got gabbro. This is a metamorphic Icelandic stone. Here we've got Grindavik, which is an area or a town in Iceland. There's grey stone from there, grey stone from Reykjavik, Líparit, and then in here we don't have any blue stone here, but there's blue stone too further up the building. Now, we mustn't forget that we did actually go back in time when we got this idea. And one of the big things that was found was a stone staircase or stone sort of pathway during the dig. So we created a cleft in the main public space of the building. You go down through the layers of time, and the bottom of that would be these stones, which were excavated at the time of the archaeological dig. And that way, we can set this building on its foundation. We can see, look at it, everyone comes in and say, this is where Iceland, as we know it, in human terms, started. And then we can go up through the layers of time. Now, the politicians make lots of decisions, and one of the most contested was the establishment of large-scale aluminium smelting in Iceland using very cheap power. Now, there had been one plant for some time, but there was one plant at another scale in the east of the country, where they had to dam a huge area of the highlands, make 35-kilometer tunnels under the landscape, change the direction of the rivers, and goodness knows what. One of the byproducts of that aluminium smelting process are these aluminium rods. It's a tangle, it's a knot. And we thought, well, isn't that actually what politicians are really good at doing? You know, they set this industry going, and what they did is they created a tangle. So we took this tangle, and we talked to an artist who's been working with them, and he created a ceiling for us, which is a tangle all over the central breakout space. And with that, the politicians can go there and say, either, well, one day I'm going to do something as messy as that, or maybe I'll spend my time as a politician trying to unravel the knots that other people have done. So it's like a memory to where they are. Now, the other spaces, we just try and calm this building down. There's enough going on. So we try and show what craftsmanship can still be done in Iceland. They're still pretty handy at doing formwork. There's quite exceptional steelwork in Iceland, so we create sort of little tests to show how far they can take the steelwork. Beautifully done. And then there's another game that's here. Because you know, politics tends to go from left to right, from right to left. So how do you do a building that is non-political? How can you create a space that actually bridges all those? And the only way that we thought we could do it is say, well, let's make everything north-south. So all the ceilings, all the floors, all the wall claddings are north-south. So even though the politics go from left to right, at least the politicians know where they're going or know where they've been. And that sort of settles that. Then, by the main entrance, as we know in this shifting of politics between left and right and all kinds of different moves, things can get disturbed. We're experiencing that now. We're going through a very, very tumultuous political time. And what happens when things go out of order is they start to move. And this pendulum, which is an art piece by our long-term collaborator, Christian Frapson, can move. Anybody can move it. Anywhere you can come to Iceland, you can go to it, you can move it. But you'll find, even though you've moved it and it swings around, after some time it'll come back to equilibrium. And we mustn't forget, no matter what kind of mess the politicians stir up, at the end of the day, it will come to equilibrium again. It may not be the equilibrium that we like, but it will settle. Now, one thing happened quite excitingly while this building was being designed. And I was reminded of it. Remember when the loudspeaker made that loud noise this morning? I thought this was an earthquake because we've been experiencing earthquakes over the last 5 years. And I thought, okay, not here too. But what the earthquakes led to were these. So we got one of the, we can watch it from the new building. You go up on the balcony on the 5th floor, you can actually see the lava coming out of it. And you know what it is? It's a building materials factory. So we've taken a bit of that, and we made the cornerstone out of it. So not only do we have the layers of time, we've actually located precisely this moment in time is here. And that then becomes the cornerstone of the building. Don't need to say anything more than that. And then on the wall behind that, as a text, which effectively is the title of this lecture, it says, Allt leiddi til þessarar stundar. Everything led to this moment. So everything that has happened in the past, all these things that we have made, everything that we've learned, everything that human beings anywhere on the planet have done, have got us to this point that we are now. And we can't change that. And it's up to us to decide whether we embrace that and recognize that and work with that, or if we just ignore it. But no matter what happens, it's always there. So thank you very much for your attention.